History textbooks often suggest the British East India Company simply stepped into a vacuum left by a collapsing Mughal empire. The reality looks more like this. By the late 1700s, the Mughals were restricted to a small pocket around Delhi. The true pan-Indian power standing in the path of British expansion was the Maratha Empire, a state that controlled the vast majority of the subcontinent. This expansion began during a 27-year struggle for survival. Immediately after the death of the Maratha founder, Chhatrapati Shivaji, the Mughal emperor Aurangzeb marched south with his full imperial might, intent on annexing the Deccan. Shivaji's successors, Sambhaji and Rajaram, relied on the rugged Sahyadri hills to wage a grueling war of attrition. They utilized speed and surprise to bleed the larger Mughal armies, refusing to engage in the kind of set-piece battles that would have ended their resistance. Leadership eventually passed to Queen Tarabai, who shifted the Maratha strategy. Instead of merely defending the south, she organized large armies to invade Mughal territories in the north, forcing the emperor to fight on multiple fronts. By the time the Mughal threat receded, the Marathas had transformed from a regional resistance into a battle-hardened military state. But as their borders pushed into northern India, the distance between the front line and the capital meant the old, centralized ways of ruling were no longer physically possible. To manage an empire that now stretched thousands of miles, the Marathas shifted their administration from a single royal household to a mobile, professional bureaucracy. Executive authority moved away from the Chhatrapatis, the kings, and toward the Peshwas, a line of hereditary prime ministers who managed the state's finances and military campaigns. Peshwas like Balaji Vishwanath and his son Baji Rao I effectively sidelined the throne. They spent their lives on horseback, pushing Maratha influence into Delhi and beyond, turning the Mughal emperor into a mere figurehead under their protection. Curious trade-off here. If you are a king and your prime minister is the one winning every battle and collecting every tax, where does your actual power go? Baji Rao's successes expanded the empire so rapidly that a new problem emerged. No single person, not even a Peshwa, could micromanage a territory this size from a single city. The solution was to stop treating the empire as a single unified block and start treating it as a network. The state reorganized into a confederacy. The Peshwa remained the nominal leader, but he granted his top generals the right to rule their own territories as long as they remained loyal to the Maratha cause. The empire split into distinct spheres of influence: the Shindes in Gwalior, the Holkars in Indore, the Bonsles in Nagpur, and the Gayakwads in Baroda. These commanders didn't need to wait for orders from the capital to defend their borders. They collected their own revenue, raised their own armies, and signed their own local treaties, allowing the empire to react to threats instantly. This structure allowed the Marathas to secure the subcontinent with a speed that a traditional, slow-moving monarchy couldn't match. By delegating power, they effectively placed a Maratha army in every corner of India simultaneously. This decentralization had effects that reached far into civilian life, as regional capitals began to rival the central seat of power in culture and wealth. In central India, Ahilyabai Holkar governed the Indore region for 30 years. Under her rule, the city became a prosperous trade hub, protected by her own disciplined administration and a network of new roads. Ahilyabai used the wealth of her region to fund projects across all of India. She restored the Kashi Vishwanath Temple in Varanasi and the Somnath Temple in Gujarat, sites that had been neglected or destroyed during earlier wars. At the same time, in the southern region of Tanjavur, Sarfoji II turned his court into a center of scientific inquiry. His autonomy allowed him to establish medical research centers that offered free treatment and a printing press that produced works in multiple languages. It was here that the modern structure of Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam dance took their final form. Regional leaders had proven they could build vibrant, wealthy states on their own. But as their individual power grew, the common identity that held the confederacy together began to stretch thin. When regional chiefs have their own armies and their own treasuries, their interests eventually stop aligning with the center. By the mid-1700s, the Shindes and Holkars were often as focused on their internal rivalries as they were on external threats. This lack of coordination was laid bare in 1761 at the Third Battle of Panipat, where the Marathas faced the Afghan invader Ahmad Shah Abdali. To be clear, this wasn't a fight against the British. It was a massive collision between the Marathas and an Afghan force that had moved into northern India. The Marathas were defeated, losing thousands of their best soldiers. But the deeper damage was to the Confederacy's unity. In the aftermath, the regional chiefs largely retreated to their own territories, pursuing local power rather than a shared national defense. The same independence that allowed the empire to grow so quickly now meant it couldn't present a unified front. Each chief was ruling a private kingdom, and the Peshwa's ability to command them all had effectively vanished. The British East India Company recognized this fragmentation. During the Anglo-Maratha Wars, they didn't try to defeat a single united nation. Instead, the British negotiated with the chiefs separately. They signed a treaty with the Shindes while fighting the Holkars and isolated the Peshwa from his generals. By 1818, the British had dismantled the Confederacy piece by piece until the Maratha state ceased to exist. Though the political structure collapsed, the core principle behind it, Swarajya, or self-rule, remained. The Marathas had demonstrated that an Indian power could govern nearly the entire subcontinent with its own administrative and naval systems. This memory provided a psychological blueprint for the 20th century movement that would eventually reclaim Indian independence. It leaves us with a question about how we organize ourselves today. Is a government stronger when it empowers its local leaders to innovate, or does that very freedom make it impossible for a